So today in my room, in my online room, I have Jasey-Jay Anderson, the 7-time Olympian going for eight. I
Six going
2010
for seven.
six going for seven. Well, no, maybe you're already seven in your mind and going for the eighth. We don't know yet.
True.
And 2010 Winter Olympics gold medalist, and so many more accomplishments throughout his vast career in snowboarding and being the most experienced snowboarder on the World Cup circuit. So Jasey-Jay, hi, welcome. And to get
Hello, Valeria.
today,
Nice to see you.
nice to see you too. It's been a while.
It's
So
been a very
today
long time.
I'm going to ask the interrogation like questions about your successes. I'm just joking. So let us imagine how it is dedicating your whole life to one sport.
Yeah, right. I actually, I dedicated my life to one sport in competition. Originally, when I was a child, I wasn't big on competition, and still today, I really enjoy it, but too much is definitely too much, because it actually shapes your character in a much different, more aggressive way, depending on who you are. But for me, definitely competition means you got to give it everything you got all the time, to be at your peak and the best performance you can give, and to be able to compete potentially against people that are more talented than you. Um, so it's really important to give everything you got, and you can't do that in many different avenues. So hence one sport. But to be a well-rounded athlete, in my opinion, you have to do many different sports to gain that agility and develop agility, and also to make sure you're healthy in your mind, and obviously your body can benefit from it. But in the end, it's all about variety for me. Um, and as a coach, I promote the same thing also. But as an athlete, definitely variety, many different sports, many different activities. Expand your mind to anything that can help you improve and enjoy life also throughout the process. So you have to, it's one way to enjoy the journey.
Right. So it's at one point where you love your sport so much, but then you burn out because you've had too much of it. And then there is no satisfaction or joy in doing the same sport. So, one way of keeping yourself still hungry for the sport is giving yourself the opportunity to do other sports that are still complementing the other one, but kind of giving you a different flavor.
Yeah, exactly. So ultimately, I mean, I'm always going to snowboard. And I love snowboarding. I love every facet of it. When I was a kid, I just couldn't get enough of everything snowboarding. So whether it was freestyle in a half pipe or big air, or alpine, slalom, GS, super G, just riding, free riding. Even back then, there was still mogul competitions, and I used to love doing moguls and just, riding powder. So it was everything about snowboarding. And today it's still the same thing, but obviously the sport has evolved quite a bit, and I've aged quite a bit. So, with family, with business, with my body, things evolve, and I just can't do what I used to do. Luckily, alpine snowboarding caters to older people because you have to be experienced to do well, and at the same time, your body can still handle it because of the type of sport it is. You don't have to move like a young person. You can actually get away with moving like an old guy and still winning races.
So, you mentioned you're coaching. Who do you coach?
Various people. I've done camps quite a bit in Asia, actually, in Japan and China. Um, I coach people locally, privately. So kids that want to just get to the next level, or um, actually, a lot of Chinese clients come to Canada for this because they always look for the best, and oftentimes money is no object. So they come to Canada and they want the best. That's it. So that comes with character also often. So if the child is motivated, or the person is motivated, they absorb the information. So I'm not wasting my time, and the child isn't wasting their time. So in Canada, oftentimes they do it for fun, they do it because it's accessible, but when it's time to shift gears and really get involved, um, it's harder. You have to teach them what motivation is, and you have to teach them what their goals could be. Whether it's in China, they're so performance driven right from the get go, and it's ingrained in the community, in Chinese culture, that it doesn't have to be taught necessarily. Whether it's in Canada, it has to be taught. So it's different approaches depending on who I work with. But I don't like wasting my time. So how should I say? The people that come to see me are usually already motivated, and I have to do an interview before I start coaching someone, so I see it right away if they are motivated or not.
Yeah, isn't it nice to have somebody so fired up that they get the energy into you and you're both excited to work together versus you pulling them up?
Yeah, exactly. And it can be taught also very quickly. So, if one kid thinks, oh, yeah, great, I'm going to train with one of the best in the world. And after one session, I'll be like, well, you have to get a lot of passion growing inside you. So I won't be able to work with you for a little while until you stoke that fire. And
Right.
just that stokes the fire. So they're like, wait a minute, I want to train with you again. Well, you're not ready for that. You have to wait until you've built up that fire. So right now you don't have enough drive. And that comes. And I'm not telling them, they might, and I don't necessarily work with the most talented. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to just create Olympic champions. What I'm trying to create is people that go beyond their own boundaries. When people set the boundaries, and they don't believe that they can go beyond that, that's a very dangerous situation. And especially as a coach, you have to be able to teach them to go beyond their limits. You have to challenge them. Most people on the planet don't like getting challenged. It's an irritant. They don't like going out of their comfort zones. And as a high level coach, basically that's your only job, is to get them out of their comfort zone. Sometimes, when you build up towards big events, or just certain times of year, or depending what the person is living, you adapt to that. You adapt to their situation. So if there's too many things that takes them out of their comfort zone, then that's detrimental. But most people are just so comfortable in that comfort zone that most of the time I just have to come in, and that's my job, is to push those boundaries.
That's
So
amazing.
that's what I'm looking for. So some kids might only be top 20 in the world at some point. Might never be top 20 in the world, but as long as they're getting out of their comfort zone, they're learning, they're pushing themselves, that's what's motivating me. And that's what teaches the child or the person about themselves, about their own limits.
Being such a well-versed athlete, coach, parent, friend, um, team
Person.
member, you competed for a while and then you decided to have a short retirement and then you decided to come back to the sport. And what I am talking to a lot of athletes about is, what is the thought process? What are the emotions when you're leaving a chunk of your life, which is the professional sport, behind, and you're exiting and entering a new chapter? And that new chapter can be very fascinating, but that limbo in between finalizing that step of coming into the new and leaving the old one behind, how does it feel? And why did you decide to come back? And I have my assumptions, knowing you personally, but I really want our listeners, viewers, to understand the driving source that makes you make such decisions?
I guess to simplify it, it's basically two things. You either retire fulfilled or you retire unfulfilled. I retired fulfilled um, in 2010. After I won gold in Vancouver, that was it for me. That was my fourth Olympics. I didn't need any more. I had won world championships, world titles, crystal globes, every World Cup possible in border cross, alpine, in everything. And so you don't want to get too greedy either. You can always go for more, but I had young children, and I had done what I had set out to do, which was to see what I was capable of. So retiring in 2011, I was completely happy with that. What brought me back was well, I guess there's a little parentheses in there where when you retire, you definitely need to have another passion besides snowboarding, something that really pushes you. Um, and the hardest thing is to go into, I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I had a good idea that I was starting a snowboard business. I found that in my career, equipment was such a pain in the butt that I wanted to deal with that. I wanted to learn about it and fix it. And actually, what I wanted to do was go into coaching. Then I realized, okay, I need to make boards for the kids because you can't, it's really hard to get boards from Europe to Canada, and they have to be fairly reasonably priced. So I said, okay, now I have to make equipment, and then I'll be able to start coaching. But unfortunately, I got sucked into the equipment so heavily that I just never had time to transition to full-time coaching. And the the equipment part was very, very complex, to the point where I was like, I need to test this. I can't teach someone else how to test. Even at this point in 2010, I was by far the most versed in just pure equipment, like boards and plates. I had developed my own plate for 2010 and the boards to go with it. So, but the manufacturing was done by someone else. So I decided, okay, I'll start manufacturing. But as you learn, you develop more questions. And also, as you learn, if you teach someone else, your time is devoted to that, and not necessarily so much on the development. So a combination of the two, I just had to start competing again so that I could finalize the information. So basically, I just started back again, promising myself not to do it for results, but to doing it purely for information. So even throughout my career, as I evolved through my career, I really learned that you can't be greedy in anything you're passionate about. You can't necessarily do it for money or do it for glory. You really have to do it because it's something you want to check off your bucket list and that you feel is fulfilling. So even Olympic gold, that's what it was. It was really just check that box, man. You can do it. Now just get it done. So that when you show up at the Olympics, you're not maybe one of the best or just one of the best. You're for sure the best, and you're going to walk away with a gold. So that's what I did in 2010. But it was such a grueling journey, because you're pushing 100 miles an hour and more, but everyone around you can't follow necessarily the pace that you're trying to set for yourself. So people just end up thinking you're crazy. So you can't live your whole life like that, and you can't work, let's say, at that pace and then show up at home with two little kids and start imposing that on your wife and your kids. You have to change your personality completely when you're at home with your kids. So that was tough. And I knew that's why I couldn't just keep pushing for Olympic gold all the time, every time. So when I retired in 2010, that was it as far as pushing for gold. So for the last 10 years, I've been developing. When I came back was just for information. So I've been gathering all this information for 10 years. And it's quite the humility pill that you have to swallow to be able to write off results that you know you can get. Like I knew I could show up at most races and win them if I was just on winning equipment. As far as my body, my capabilities, technical, tactical, psychological, all that was just, I mean, always has never left me. And so momentarily, that humility was fine, but sometimes it really got to me, especially when people started disrespecting, let's say, who I was, or to the point where they just don't know what you've accomplished, and they just step right over you like you're nobody. Which actually, I mean, because I'm not one of those people that will protect what I've accomplished unless I'm pinned up against the wall and I need to get through to another place, overcome a barrier. And I'm like, do you know what I've done? And that sounds like the worst thing you could ever say. It's like, do you know who I am? You just don't say that. But when you get to that point where you have to say that, you're like, wow, I gotta do something that actually reminds or teaches. And so more and more as my career evolved in development, more I erased myself from everyone, from my team, from everything that wasn't necessarily how should I say, everything that was competitive. I just erased myself just so I wouldn't have to say that and say those words. Do you know who I am? And honestly, this next chapter here, I mean, who knows if I'll qualify for the Olympics in 2022 or not, but I'm definitely going to give it everything I have. And I am doing it for the result this time. So so I did 2014, 2018, definitely not. I mean, when I show up at the Olympics, I do the best I can, but it's definitely still within the box that I set for myself, which is you use what you've developed to keep the testing going, because every race is a testing opportunity, especially the Olympics. Um, so these next Olympics, I'm going. My boards are the fastest in the world, so there's no question there. But the plate system that I tried to develop, I'd say is 80% there. But that other 20% for me is not worth it because I know what has to be done and I'm not there. So basically, I'll use the plates that everyone else is using on my boards, and I'm going for an Olympic medal in 2022. And then the tough part is because I don't do social media, I don't do promotional stuff, I don't hunt for sponsors. All I do is develop and build. That's all I do. So I'm always in the shadows. And what happens also with that is your character becomes pretty awkward. So whatever performance angle I applied to my snowboarding competitive career, I've kind of channeled it into the development and business part of what I do, which again makes some people, because most people you work with are going to be 9 to 5. So they don't understand what's 24/7, and basically you turn the light on, you start working, you switch the light off, you stop working. And even in my dreams, I'm working. So it's really tough to quantify that level of work and commitment to a project. Luckily, I was able to channel it because most people that retire don't have those opportunities. They really have to, lock the bear or the tiger in a cage and forget about it. I was able to actually keep the tiger going and just channel it to what's productive. And one of the reasons also is my kids are 15 and 16 now. So they're actually pushing me to push myself. So I don't have to come home and be the nurturing parent. They're like, okay, Dad, that's about enough testing. You should start, like kicking ass again. I'm like, oh, I mean, is that where we're going with this? And so they're like, yeah, yeah, if you're going to the Olympics, go to win. So I'm like, all right. And most people would look at me and go like, you are off your rocker, at 46 thinking you can still win. But to me, it's not even a question. Like, forget my age. I still got it in me. If I can be fit enough and have enough time on snow with the right equipment, I mean, it's not even a question that I can walk away with a victory. I mean, on that hill, I think it was not last year, the year before, so 2 years ago, I guess that would be 2020. I got a top 8 finish on the Olympic hill, um, and very untrained and unprepared. So trained, prepared, that means I can win. And it's not like since 44 to 46, I've completely depleted. My body is still able to do it, and my mind is still there. What's the toughest is your heart. Like, how stoked is the fire? And to just ride and compete, no problem. The tough part is support. How much support do you have? The proper training environment, and how much your coach helps you to set up. And I'm actually not even on the national team right now, so I have to qualify to qualify. So I'm
Wow.
really far from the goal. Um, but I can still absolutely do it. That's not a question.
So, from the coach's side, from my experience, the coaches that I've spoken with, we didn't discuss the preparation of the athlete. What we did discuss is that a lot of coaches feel helpless when a retired athlete comes back to them and says, "Hey, can you help me? I don't know what I should be doing. What's my next passion? Where's my next direction?" And they feel that they are not equipped themselves to give an advice. They're not able to refer them to anyone. So, what would
Often
you
they're
do?
not, like you said. But
Right.
I find that professional life, or just, regular human life, is very similar to professional athlete life, in that if you don't do it properly, you won't be happy. Um, so that's it. I mean, most athletes do. I'd say, and this is just throwing a number out of thin air, but let's say 90% of athletes retire unfulfilled. And part of it is just what I explained, is they just didn't go through the proper steps. They didn't have the proper guidance. And it's no fault necessarily of the coach, because we need more coaches. That's one of our problems, is we never have enough coaches. But then, so if you're unfulfilled as an athlete, you don't know why you're unfulfilled. Now you're going into life and you're supposed to apply these things that you've learned. But again, if you didn't learn properly, apply it properly, how can you do the same to your normal life? So these principles apply to normal life. You look at a person, let's say, that would be considered successful, like Warren Buffett or Steve Jobs. They're people that were naturally could naturally see the proper path and solution, and they did have proper guidance at some point to be able to help them see the proper path. So it's not by necessarily full luck that they succeeded. It's just that they were able to see the path as well as getting support. It's a combination of the two. Seeing the path is just knowing all the steps that you have to do to create success. So one way, if you don't have proper guidance, is to just make sure you learn from your mistakes. No matter what, that's the best place to learn, is to not be able to make mistakes, but you definitely have to learn from them. So aside from having good guidance, that was my next best way to learn, is to learn from my mistakes. So at first, it's embarrassing to make mistakes. You don't want to make mistakes. Most people, most children, they spill something, they do something wrong, they'll automatically just push it away, say, "Oh, it wasn't me." But you never learn from that, and you never assume responsibility. So that means that problem will never go away. So one of the things I definitely tried to work on was assuming responsibility for my own actions, for my own environment. When something goes wrong, even if it's not my fault, I try to take as much responsibility as I can for it. And that helped me learn, just assuming responsibility. It's that simple. But beyond that, it's hard to. I mean, the world will never be perfect. The only way you can equip someone with the proper tools is simple things like what I just explained: to learn from your mistakes and assume responsibility. Those are simple things. If you actually light up to that and say, "Oh yeah, I'll be aware of that," that will help you go quite far.
I couldn't agree more, especially when it comes to responsibility, because a lot of the times, if an athlete made a mistake in the career and that ended their career, a lot of the times they blame someone else, whether it's the coach or someone else who is to blame for their career to end. And if I find that it still lingers in the back, where it's pulling them back instead of taking that, learning that, assuming the responsibility, just like you said, and moving on. Because I don't think someone can move on from the place of the mistake if they don't learn from it, assume the responsibility, and then apply the skill that they've learned from it further in their life.
Exactly.
So, would you agree with me that as a coach, let's say you're raising an athlete and your athlete had an amazing career and you've taught him or her everything you knew, you were the guide, they retired and they thought they are fulfilled and they decided to retire. You know, a year later, they come back to you and they say, Jasey, I thought I was fulfilled, but I'm not. I don't know where I am. I feel lost. What do you suggest I do?
I mean, at that point, it's just discussion. It's a very personal place in that person's life. So again, every situation is individual. So just talking through it. But in the end, you have to find passion. That's fashion, find passion towards a project, towards meaning of life. So it can be resumed to something that simple. Find a passion.
Do you have a recipe for finding a new passion?
Yeah, being active. For example, with me, if you put me in an office all day long, I'm not happy. If you make me work in the city, I'm not happy. So at one point, you check off these things that tell you, okay, I'm not happy doing this, I'm not happy doing that. And obviously, you have the other list, which is what are you happy doing? So I'm happy when I'm outside. I'm happy when I'm learning. I'm happy when I'm around people. Um, and then that kind of guides you towards something. One thing that's really important, it's not a for sure thing, but what guided me to either coaching or manufacturing equipment, things like that, was staying close to what I had already learned in my professional athlete life.